There we go.
This meeting
Oh,
is being recorded.
Okay, so I believe you're recording it now.
yeah,
Thank-
I'll share that with you. I'm not sure how to share permission for recording, so I'll
Okay,
record it and
thank
email it out.
I'm really glad my
Appreciate
rant was not recorded, just in passing. That's great.
So as a fire safe council, what you have the capability of doing is applying for additional funds to work on different projects throughout your community. That can be evacuation projects, it can be fire breaks, fuel breaks, it can be signage. I mean, there's a variety of different grants, federal grants and state funding and private funding that comes through our organization. We're a pass-through agency. So what we do is actually accept applications from groups like fire safe councils, firewise communities, different organizations, sometimes RCDs, which are resource conservation districts, to put together projects to identify what we can do to help make your community more safe due to the, as you said, you have great fire protection. And I think that's evident by your chief and your department who's here, the Richmond Fire Chief, and the different Contra Costa Fire agencies who are all involved in trying to make sure that your community stays safe. As a private entity or as a potential nonprofit organization that has the ability to apply for grant funding, one of the things that you can do is enhance and augment that existing type of fire safety and fire prevention methods that can be used by communities. So if you, and I'll share some other documents if you're interested in seeing them, like our maps of different fire safe councils throughout the state. If you look at certain areas in the state where there are fire safe councils, some counties, and I'll use Siskiyou County as an example up here in my area, have 24 different fire safe councils in their county. And each of the fire safe councils actually is coordinated now by a new grant funding project that we put out, which is called a county coordinator. And having a county coordinator oversee the different fire safe council projects, working on a countywide CWPP, which is a community wildfire protection plan, to make sure that community projects and identified projects within the community can be taken care of, and that folks are able to apply for additional funds. That's the mechanism for getting some of the funds that become made available through the different organizations that provide that funding. So as a pass-through agency, we encourage specifically this group, because Contra Costa County, well, I'll say this cautiously, with Cheryl Miller in the group here, Cheryl has done work for both Alameda and Contra Costa County to try to coordinate having CWPPs created, to create funding opportunities and to help those different areas. Well, that's a pretty big area with a high population. So getting something focused specifically for Contra Costa County through the city of Richmond, which Chief Montoya is currently working on, you're creating an opportunity to really get additional funds, more funds for project work to work in your area. As a retired fire guy myself, I'll tell you, the mutual aid process through the state of California. Throughout my career, I had the opportunity to respond to several different counties during wildfires and to be in different responsibilities as an engine operator, as a task force leader, as a strike team leader, to take engine crews into areas that I'm not familiar with and have never been before. And some of the different fire safe councils, for example, in California, have worked on things like creating signage that allows us to understand the infrastructure of the areas we're responding into. If I'm coming from an area, I came from a very rural county where we are used to forests and a lot of what we call WUI, or wildland urban interface, where houses and forests are kind of all built together. But sometimes when I respond down to areas like Santa Rosa or Napa, or even the Oakland Hills during that fire event, we're not familiar with the way that those places are built. We don't know where the water supplies are. There's a lot of challenges. And fire safe councils, for example, go in and I'll use Santa Cruz as a great example, have put up signage for all incoming fire equipment to respond into their area. As a fire safe council, they did this so that I, as an engine operator driving into an area and I see a road that I'm not familiar with, it's not even on a map, it's not on a GPS or anything else, but there's a road here and I can see there's a bridge ahead of me. I want to know if I can get my very, very heavy piece of equipment over that bridge. Well, they've actually posted infrastructure signs to show this bridge has this capacity and it's been engineered to this, ability to take this piece of equipment, I can move into that area. They also put signs like water supply 1 mile ahead. So I know that if I'm driving in an area I'm not familiar with, I'm going to have a water supply for my engine. So if I'm fighting fire, I can actually keep a continuous supply of water to keep my crew safe. So there's so many great components of what can be done. And it's not taking an existing fire protection issue and saying, hey, we already have that. It's augmenting it and making sure that in these really, really challenging times here with weather conditions and changing climate and different things that are happening, that we're all prepared to basically go in there and make a difference and make our state, our community safer. So I hope that helps explain a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
So with that, Chief, we have 29 people here. We could do an introduction, or we could actually move straight into conversation. I see we have a lot of our partners here, and I'll call out our partners so we can let the community members see and know that we have our agency partners here.
Yeah.
And
Go ahead,
that's
Mike.
okay. So I start off with you, Chief. You are really the driving force behind this. So I'd like you to take an opportunity to, I think everybody knows you, but maybe a quick introduction.
Sure. Chief Montoya, City of Richmond Fire Chief. And just to give you a little background succinctly on how we got to this point today, is that when I first got here, Sohail Labana had invited me to tour her area or your area and see the urban interface and the dangers and the concerns that you guys have had. And so I did that, and I was along with one of my battalion chiefs and toured that area. Sohaila and her group were nice enough to show us around, and then came back, and it was just one of those feelings up front that I'll tell everybody, that I just felt that as a fire chief, some of your concerns perhaps in the past had not been heard. And so luckily I retired from LA County Fire Department, and one of my coworkers in LA County, which is now, he's retired also, Jay Lopez, had, I always keep in contact with him, and he reached out to me and asked me how it went here, or was going here. And so I mentioned all this to him, and that's where this all started. He now works with Mike and the state on as a contractor for them to do his part. He's very knowledgeable in these types of areas. He handled all the vegetation management for all of Los Angeles County. And so that's how this conversation started. He connected me with Mike Wilson and his group. And I wasn't, I had heard of fire safe councils in LA County, but LA County is just so big and vast that I really didn't pay attention as to the inner workings of them. And so, with him and Mike gave me that background, and, started this process. And it's really exciting to me because it's just like Mike explained, it's something that I think is going to be very beneficial, not only to your area, but to the city of Richmond and surroundings area. Because as you well know, wildfires don't have boundaries. They continue to burn into other areas. And this is where this is going to be, I think, I know it's going to be very beneficial for this area, for our city, and moving forward. I'm really excited on seeing this all the way through. So one of the challenges for Sohaila especially was just getting all of the stakeholders together and talk about this. And this is where I really have to give a big thanks to Mike and his group, because he was able to do that. As a fire chief, it would have been very, very difficult for me to do that. And so Mike was able to, under his umbrella, get all the stakeholders together and have those conversations, start this conversation. And then also what we've done up to this point, just to let you guys know, is we've covered, we had a map that was generated within the city of Richmond and showed the areas of concern. I dubbed it the name, the circle of concern in the area that we're talking about, in the Wildcat area. And then we have gone over that. We've also gone over the ownership of parcels in this area. So at this point, this is what brings us to us today, where now and I hope that all of you received the copy of the FireSafe Council handbook, because it's very, very thorough, very detailed, and it goes exactly the way this is all set up. And I know that might help for you, Lauren, if some of the questions are all of the questions I think are answered in that handbook. And so, but I think right now, Mike will give us, the navigation necessary to start this process with the group now, which is where we are at now. I look at it, and I could be wrong, but I look at your leader in this process as Sohaila. But then again, that's up to you guys. But I think that she would be a great leader in this process for this FireSafe Council to be established. And my job, like I said, as a fire chief, it's not common practice in a FireSafe Council process, but I think it's important. And this is a discussion that I've had both with Mike and with Jay Lopez in terms of how this is going to get started. I want to, be with you at the beginning, but eventually this is something that you will eventually take over. But I have no problem in being part of this in the beginning, because it is meant to work and be maintained by a group like yourselves. So perhaps I took a little bit longer than I was supposed to, but I'll hand it over back to Mike, and then we could get into what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah, a quick introduction of our Assistant Chief of East Bay Regional Parks Fire. Chief, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Kari Haley, Assistant Fire Chief for East Bay Regional Park District. I'm glad to be here, and at some point it will be I'll be able to shed some light on the work that the Park District is doing in Wildcat Canyon, for example. Sometimes when work is being done, you can't always notice trees that have been thinned or work that's been completed. So part of my role will be able to let the community know what work is ongoing within your community and what work is planned within your community. And just to give you a little background of the Park District, we have a wildfire hazard reduction and resource management plan that was enacted in 2012 after some legal got tied up in court for a bit. But we've been doing fuels work since 2012 within that plan that gives us environmental clearance to do work, and also gives us the ability to get grant money to do work on the Park District property that we own. And the district has a unique benefit and also challenge on its hands. We just a fun fact, the Park District is the largest regional park district in the United States. What that means is in your community, you have more open space around you than anybody else in the United States. Regional means that within an urban area, you have open space that's next to your city, and that's a benefit to those who use open space for mental health and other activities. But along with that challenge, the land that the Park District has acquired has come with some challenges from historical things that have happened as far as plantation planted eucalyptus or Monterey pine, and also with environmental conditions that we're all dealing with now with climate change. And so some of those are some of the things that the district has been gearing up for, with either gaining access for additional funds so we can do work. And I'll give you a simple analogy from a fire perspective. We look at managing land, it was already like having a fire incident. And then with climate change, it's an incident within an incident. So now we're dealing with trees that are dying off when we already were trying to manage the land that we already had. And so when you have an incident within an incident, you have to, in fuels world, you have to get more funding, get more resources, and prior to that, come up with your plan, and you execute and send your resources out so that you can mitigate the problem. And that's where the Park District is with the challenge that we have right now with climate change.
Thank you, Chief. And again, another example of agency partners working together to keep your community safe. Next, I'd like to introduce Matt from PG&E. Matt's trying to get his mute off, I can tell. There he is.
It took me a second there, Mike. Thanks for the introduction, and just a hello to everybody. My name is Matthew McLean. I'm a supervising program manager in vegetation management at Pacific Gas and Electric. I'm a resident of Contra Costa County, and it's just always been a great partnership with the California FireSafe Councils. I know that we really see a lot of good partnership. It's helpful for agencies and myself, the utility, to collaborate and do partnership to make communities safer. So I've seen a lot of good project work get done, especially in Contra Costa County. So glad to be here. If there's any interface between the utility and power lines or anything that we can support on, we're happy to do so. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. We have other representatives here from PG&E as well. And let's see here. Les, I think you're here. And well, let's see. How about down to Charlotte? How about you? And Charlotte's from East Bay EBMUD.
Hey folks, I'm gonna have to stay off camera because I'm in transit to another field meeting, but my name is Charlotte Sullivan. I represent East Bay EBMUD and the West Contra Costa area. I basically have the area all the way from Berkeley to Crockett on the west side of the hill. So Wildcat Canyon, I've actually worked on multiple FireSafe councils that range between Oakland, Berkeley, and all the way now. This is great that there's going to be one started for this area. So I appreciate being a player at this table and looking forward to working with you all.
Thank you. So again, another great partner to have here. Next, I'd like to go over to Lily Allen from the California Coastal Conservancy.
Folks, forgive me for leaving my computer off and having some bandwidth issues today. I'm Lily. I'm with the State Coastal Conservancy, and I work in the North Coast region on their fire resiliency work. However, there are only 2 fire resiliency folks, so I go up and down the coast as needed. And I'm interested in the Bay Area generally and really supporting some of the great work everyone's doing here. So thank you.
Thank you. And then Mark Silva.
Morning. I'm Mark Silva. I'm Ranger Supervisor for the watershed, East Bay EBMUD's watershed, and I'm participating in this to hopefully answer any questions people may have with our watershed lands, and only part of the small part of it butts up to your guys' group. So
Thanks, Mark. And then I'm going to introduce my partner from Central California, Brooke McAllister.
Hello, everyone. Brooke McAllister. I'm the Central California Regional Coordinator for California FireSafe Council. One quick note to mitigate the feedback problem we're having. If you're not speaking, go ahead and mute your computer or your phone. I think that's where some of that echo is coming from. So I am Mike's counterpart down here in Central, and I really appreciate seeing so many people in this meeting. This is amazing. I know it seems overwhelming, but it's worth it, and we can offer a lot of help through California FireSafe Council to you all, not just through grants, but through networking and collaboration. So it's really great to see so many people here. I also want to say Mike got married on Saturday. So congratulations, Mike. It was an awesome wedding and I was really happy to be there. So nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Brooke.
Congratulations, Mike.
Thanks,
Well,
Chief.
happy for you.
Thank you very much.
And to
I'm
Brooks,
quite happy.
And to Brooks' comment, yeah, this is a serious group. So these people are serious.
Yeah, and I think just because we don't want to take this meeting on too far here, I'm going to stop with the introductions and kind of get into the meat and potatoes. So I apologize for any of our agency partners who I didn't introduce, but I know we're already almost a half hour into this. So getting started. Many of you from the community who are there, and we talked kind of pre-meeting, some of the folks who were here about the different streets you live on. I unfortunately am not that familiar with the area. I've gained some overview of the general area, but not the specific streets. And maybe one of these days I will be able to get down there and drive each of your streets so I can take a look at the great work you're doing. But that's the goal. It's getting all of this community together to work to kind of plan and organize what you need to help make your community safe, with the assistance of all these great agency partners who are here to lend a hand and give the advice on the professional level. And we have watershed people, we have fire people, we have different power people from these organizations that are all here to basically make sure that as we work on this, that we work together. I just saw a question in the chat. Is CAL FIRE involved? Yes, we've had our CAL FIRE unit forester at OR at all of our meetings. He may be jumping on here or maybe here already, I don't know, but we have a great representation from all these different parties who have sat down together to try to make this work its best for you as a community. And as Chief mentioned, it sounds like everybody got a copy of the workbook in how to develop a FireSafe Council. Well, there's a lot of it that as you read through it, you're going to go, oh my gosh, we have to organize, we have to be a 501c3, or we have to do this. Well, your chief is willing to take you under the authority or the umbrella of the city of Richmond. So that eliminates that immediate need to establish yourselves as a 501c3. However, I would recommend as you move forward and grow that is something you work towards, because it again gives you the ability to kind of self-govern with the board of directors selected and chosen to help you organize. But in any of the planning process of starting a FireSafe Council, I'll say today's event is the most important event that can take place, and that is getting the community together for an opportunity to see each other, to meet each other. If we weren't in a COVID situation, we would probably be all sitting around a table, and I think that would be a very much more enjoyable event than sitting in front of a computer. But as we do this, again, let's take the opportunity to work through this. Asking questions, challenging the ideas that are there, I think that's fine, but I do ask that we keep this respectful to each other. We're all here trying to accomplish one thing and one thing only, and that's to keep the community safe. So as we do that and work through the next period of this meeting and future meetings, what I'd like to do is basically kind of get down to having conversations with the community members to talk about what the biggest concerns are. What are the biggest challenges? How do we as a community identify priorities and what needs to be done first? And you'll find out from the partners who are here that a lot of the work that you've identified as being a priority to eliminate some of the fuels that may be around you and around your homes or your streets may be being worked on by one of the entities that are here. So I'm really happy to have our agency partners here to talk about some of the projects that we are already working on together. And even during these pre-conversations, prior to having this meeting, during conversations, our agency partners have identified, yes, we have a project going on in that area, but because this is obviously a priority, we're going to move that priority up before that project to get those projects done quicker. And we've seen a lot of attention and a lot of great work done by our folks. So I just, again, want to reach out and say thank you to everybody who's come together so far. So one of the things that it's important for Chief Montoya and I to do is get prepared to hand this off to the community. We're here to support you, but what we want to see is the community take this and run with it. So in this meeting, obviously you have everybody here, but I understand now from Chief Montoya that you have a potential leader who's going to kind of coordinate from the community standpoint and be the person of the point of contact who's actually going to help coordinate meetings, who's going to help facilitate any needs that arise, and to collect information and start building what is considered a FireSafe Council here in California. So Chief, I'm going to hand it back to you so you can introduce your citizen partner there.
Thanks, Mike. So as mentioned earlier, that would be, I feel Sohaila Bana, and working with her, that's who I've been coordinating with, and obviously the one who invited me out there to tour this area. I feel that's a perfect fit in my opinion to have Sohaila as your leader, and then I would plan to work with her and go through step by step with the guidance of Mike and his organization to get this started, and eventually, like Mike said, to hand this off entirely to you guys. And there's advantages of doing that, and one of them is the funding, of course. So what I wanted to do, Mike, if it's okay with you, and it's been hard for us to get her on these calls. In fact, the first one she's able to attend is Cheryl Miller, because Cheryl Miller could perhaps give us somewhat a succinct message on the council that she runs. And then I think it's important for people to hear, perhaps she has some more of an insight personally on the community side, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, Chief. I think that's a great idea.
So I've turned my camera on. Hopefully everyone can hear me. I'm Cheryl Miller. Diablo FireSafe Council has been around since 1999, and I joined them in 2010. So I don't know a whole lot about starting the organization, but I can certainly tell you about what we do and how we operate and what kinds of things you might look to us for if you've got questions about what's been working for us or not. So as Mike had said, we cover 2 counties. So that's both Alameda and Contra Costa. We were actually set up by Senator Tauscher right after the 91 Oakland Hills fire. And the idea of having a 2-county council made a lot of sense then. And it's just never changed. So we cover a really big area. One of the things we do is help develop the countywide CWPPs. So last 2 years ago, we finished the Contra Costa CWPP. We're waiting to do the Alameda. I think this kind of meeting is really difficult to do that kind of update. Our signature program that you may or may not know of, or if you don't know of it, you should, is a cost share program. So we get grant funds and then challenge community members to join with 5 neighbors or people around them to actually do a project on their properties or on adjacent public lands if they have permission. And they have to match it. So we'll bring $5,000 to the table to help you guys. You guys get to choose your contractor. We'll walk with you and help prioritize. We always work with a local agency having jurisdiction, the local fire agency. And then the project gets done really under your direction. And then we help pay the bills. And we have done a few projects up in your area, but not many. And certainly that program is funded. We do have a long wait list. We have about 54 projects waiting for funding. So that's the way that we leverage across county is with that cost share program. We're just now starting a program to help support FireWise communities. So if you decide as a smaller group within your FireSafe Council that really what you want is not as big as what a FireSafe Council is, but you want to become a FireWise community, that's something that we're going to help the fire departments and the local folks support development of FireWise communities. A little different, but still after the same ideas, because we truly believe that success happens where there's really local involvement and local leadership. So our most successful areas have been where our residents have been really active. Matt from PG&E can tell you how much we've done with Sonol, years and years and years of doing work and how that has benefited them. When the August 20 lightning fires happened, they really were in a pretty good condition. They had to evacuate, but their community as a community was really much more ready because their local residents had really participated. They did lots of these cost share programs. We were able to, because they were so well organized, bring them additional funds for work along the roadways and working with PG&E to make sure that they got continuity of power service. We also have done a lot of work in Hunsinger Canyon and in Rossmore, and those are 2 sides of a canyon down in Contra Costa County, doing all sorts of things like chipping programs and helping tree trim and helping juniper removal has been a big thing for that group. We've done years of work with Kensington, and that's been totally locally led to the point of also they've done their own fundraising, they've gotten their own matches, and at this point we're doing less and less with bringing money and more they're growing. They've decided not to become a council per se, but they have their own board just because of the way they work within the county. So there's lots of options and opportunities. And I'm really pleased that finally I could be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And one thing that's important to kind of note, and maybe Cheryl knows from experience here, is as an organization that's already established as a Fire Safe Council, capturing everybody's information and time they're putting into these meetings, it's actually in-kind grant funding opportunities. When you apply for a grant that requires a match of in-kind time or funds, we're able to actually collectively show that the community's putting in hours to try to solve these issues. So Hola, one of the things maybe you can help, we can do, in fact, I'll ask everybody to do it. We'll collect the meeting notes at the end of the meeting, but if everybody can type their name into the chat and maybe even an email, we can start collecting that data for tracking the in-kind time of people are in the community are putting in to try to make their community safe, and it's going to pay off in the long run. So thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Great work you do.
Yeah, and also if I could answer Patty's question. So there's a question in the chat. Sorry, Patty, I forgot that you guys, El Sobrante does have an application in with us, and they are still in the queue. And that's what I mean when we say we have 54 projects. We can sometimes get 20 or 30 projects done a year. There's just not enough money that comes into us to be able to push out. And as far as would your application get handed over, that would totally depend on your Fire Safe Council. We do get funders that come in and want specific areas. And of course, those projects move up in the list. So if there's a funder that comes in and says we want an El Sobrante area, then we certainly, that gets funded out. That's happening now with some of the state coastal conservancy funds, and it happens sometimes with funds that go to Alameda County. They move up on the list. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. Thank you.
Thank you. So back to Chief Montoya.
Yeah, I think too right now, Mike, if we could go, because this is some of the questions that I've gotten prior to this meeting. If you could go over, we talk about the funding, and Cheryl alluded to some of that right now, but I think defining some of the funding sources, because I mean, everybody, it's realistically, we can't do anything without any funding, really. And so other than, speak to one another and educate one another, which is what we're doing now. But to take this to that step further, which is under the umbrella of a Fire Safe Council, can you talk about some of the funding options that are available to this Fire Safe Council so that they understand that better on how moving forward with these projects is where that money is going to come from to mitigate these areas?
Absolutely. I'll start off, and I'll actually see if Lily's willing to talk a little about the funding they just worked through on their end from Coastal Commission. But the California Fire Safe Council, we have as a pass-through, we have a variety of different funding opportunities that come in. We apply for grants, and then we work as the pass-through agency to hand those grants off to other entities. And some of those grants, I'll use one that's open right now, is the SFA, which is a federal grant, which is ultimately state fire assistance grant. And that grant is made to assist organizations like this in establishing different things. That can be a creation of a CWPP. It can be grant funding to develop evacuation routes and plans, or whatever that need is within the specific community. I deal with a lot of our rural communities, and sometimes it's very basic needs that rural communities have, like capacity building. I have one Fire Safe Council up north that does not have any electronic capabilities whatsoever. So they want to know, how do they apply for grants if they don't have internet access or they don't have computers? Well, it's trying to figure out how we get them the resources, or an alternative way of applying for those grants for those different small entities. Sometimes it's really as simple as we have an entity up north that, again, trying to communicate throughout their very rural area that, again, is challenged with connectivity issues, is providing them with the ability to send out mailers to their actual community members to say, this is going on. We have a meeting at this date and time. Please come and join us. And again, getting the folks together. So it depends where you're at in the state and what your needs are, but we have a lot of different evacuation grant opportunities that come through. Right now, we're under funded through a PG&E grant right now for upcoming workshops in Northern and Central California. And PG&E is providing funds for us to work on capacity building, communications, and outreach. So we're bringing folks into those workshops to learn how to better communicate their messages, how to work on getting the message out to their different community members, or to talk about their projects to gain that support of their community to try to work towards future projects. So there's so many different opportunities, but I know that we just actually, well, Lily, do you want to talk about the program you just finished up with, or maybe you're still in the process with?
Yeah, I'm happy to chat about some of our funding opportunities. So our funding opportunities are ongoing, so you haven't missed the boat yet. And you likely won't miss the boat because we accept pre-applications on a rolling basis. I will say that we have 2 pots of money for the region here, and one is strictly for implementation, which means you've probably gone through CEQA or have a CEQA exemption. And then another is for capacity building. And that's a very, I guess, flexible type of spending where you can use it to hire staff or do trainings or buy equipment. Can also be bought under both grants, things like that. It's very flexible, helping you build capacity. I will say one thing that is different about our grants from, say, CAL FIRE is we're focused on the natural lands and the WUI. So if you live next to East Bay Parks and you want to work with, say, East Bay Parks, you can maybe apply with them, and East Bay Parks has applied to us, and we're great partners with their excellent work and love supporting it and what they're doing. You can also work with your fire district or apply with your fire district for some evacuation routes or trimmings or buffer zones, or if you want to help build capacity in that. I'll drop the link to our pre-application in the chat so you can explore it, and as well as my email so you can reach out to me if you have any questions or want to chat through some ideas. If you guys do think this would be a good opportunity, I'd like to encourage you to reach out to me and we'll do a pre-application. The goal with that is for me to help you craft the most competitive project, because I know the program pretty well. And I want to help you be really competitive in what you're doing. So I can say, yes, this, not that, or what about this thing? Would that fit well with you? And we can find balance that's the best fit. Another thing about our grants is there are no matching funds required. So we can pay for the whole thing, and we can pay about, I think, 20% for administrative costs as well. And we're hoping to spend the money pretty soon. So if this is appealing to you, please reach out quickly, and I'd be happy to chat with you or answer any questions too.
Thank you, Lily, and a great partner as we work together in trying to find ways to better make our community safer. So I see a hand raised from Maryland.
I'm glad to hear about the no matching funds potential, because I have concerns about the matching funds actually being quite a barrier to any of the lower income areas. And so I can't conceive of us getting $5,000 together in our area at this time. I also know there's a limit on those funds applying to helping private property owners who are very low income to manage vegetation. We've had routine estimates of $10,000 to remove a dangerous tree. And there are many senior or lower income homeowners in our area who cannot afford that. Sorry for the feedback. I better go mute.
All right, thank you, Marilyn, and understood. And we definitely do have some options through different capacity building grants to actually get fundings for some of those challenges. And I think that's probably, as we work together and develop, figure out what the needs are exactly, we'll be able to better manage and guide you towards those specific funding opportunities. And I really apologize. Is it Sohelia? I want to say it right.
Soheila.
Soheila, okay. I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mike. So could you provide an outline of what needs to be done, what you expect from the community? We need to know how much work it is, how much help we get, and what is the timeline? When is the earliest we can have our hands on that money? We really need it before the fire season starts. So, and I'm gonna add 2 parts of this. I'll answer your question, then I'm gonna add some other resources that we haven't talked about yet.
The timeline is now, and it's getting actually your group organized here. You're very fortunate to have Cheryl Miller already help develop the CWPP for your county. So it's utilizing that CWPP and utilizing an organized fire safe council currently under the city of Richmond. So the city of Richmond would actually be the funder who would apply for the grants. The grants would come through the city of Richmond and then be paid to pay for the services necessary to identify or facilitate any projects that you're currently going to be working on. So that's the easiest way to describe that. And I would definitely bring in one of my grants people for a future meeting to talk more into the in-depth part of grants. I'm not a grants guy. I'm an outreach and capacity building person, but we definitely have some pros in our office that can talk through the grants and exactly what it looks like to help you. The other thing that you have available is a variety of community support resources. Like I'll use Team Rubicon, for example, and they've been on these meetings with us. They were unable to attend today due to a conflict. But organizations like Team Rubicon who bring in crews that are actually able to go out and work on physical projects for you. So if an example would be a fuel reduction around properties or defensible space or home hardening needs. That was a group that we could actually work with you to bring in to support getting your project done, depending on how big or how small it is and what their capabilities are and the number of volunteers they bring in to support your community. They come with their own set of funding themselves, and they actually come in and bring full crews that are self-contained. And when I mean self-contained, if they have to stay on scene and actually work for days at a time, they create a camp and they work out of a camp, sometimes at a gymnasium or someplace like that, where they're fully self-contained, feed themselves, take care of themselves, and then go out during the day and work on the project work. So great opportunities and great folks out there to support you as we move forward. So I hope that answered that question. And I'll jump to the next hand up. I see Pam
before
has
you
her hand.
move to the next hand,
okay.
I have an important question and point to make. Our area is a combination of city and county. We are very grateful to Chief Montoya, but just wanted to mention that we also have unincorporated county meshed in our area, and hope the program takes care of both, because one cannot be safe without the other.
Sure. And as mentioned by the East Bay Regional Parks Fire Assistant Chief, there's actually some specific plans that are in place on the East Bay Regional Parks property that as they work on those projects, that would be their project they're working on. And then with private property, for example, or different areas throughout the area there, we would be looking at other funding opportunities or project works in those different areas. So again, Chief Montoya is probably the expert, or his fire prevention folks are the experts on identifying where those areas are that, those projects get started in. But I hope that answers that. I'm going to hand it over to Pam. I see your hand up, Pam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you so much for this valuable information. So Hila just mentioned this gerrymandered situation we have here, where somebody can literally be across the street and either be in San Pablo, El Sobrante, or Richmond. And clearly, if there's a fire across the street, it makes no sense to not put the fire out just because they're across the street. I live on a hillside with a huge, huge swath of brush. I've cleared a lot of it, but now I need it chipped. And my property is, my address is El Sobrante, but my property abuts Richmond. So there have been fires on this hill before. It's actually a pretty grassy hill because of the fires. We've had several over the years. Last time we had one was about 15 years ago. We had 11 fire trucks up here. We had an airplane. It was a huge fire, as a big fire would be on a hill like this, especially if there are winds. So I have two questions. Sorry to have to get so much story out here. So my question is two questions. One, I know you just addressed a little bit of the question about the gerrymander problem, but this is kind of not just like a house next to a little park. This is like a huge hillside that has these two jurisdictions in it. And then the fire truck problem of a very windy street that has cars parked on it where the fire trucks would never make it past. How do we deal with that? Those are two separate questions.
And I'll hand that question over to the chief, who has that local expertise on that.
Yeah, and I was gonna request that. Thanks, Mike. So Pam, yeah, it's something that when we look at that area, you're right. There is a lot of gerrymandering, but one of the things that I had prefaced with my present when I opened up with Mike on this meeting was that we've identified, the tour that my battalion chief and I went out there to look at the area. We've identified those areas, and we've also taken the information that Sohaila and your group had given us. And that's where we've identified those different areas. We've numbered them. I have that information here from your group on those areas and what the concern is in that particular area. So I'm sure that without having the map in front of me is one of the areas that you're talking about. So this is something that we've already identified. And like we had already alluded to, where this fire safe council moving forward, there is no boundaries like where a fire is going to stop. And just because it's in the city of Richmond, it's going to go into another area. It's going to go into that other area, especially if it's wind driven. So that's part of this process. And luckily we've already identified those areas. And this is what I was going to talk about. And this is a good time to do this in terms of prioritizing projects. I know Cheryl Miller alluded that a little bit already. And this is going to be part of this process where we prioritize those projects. And you're seeing that in your area, but then somebody else on another area, and the circle of concern that we've already established, that area there can be a lot higher than perhaps your area. And I'm just thinking off the top of my head, whereas it could be your area that is the most important to mitigate first. So this is all part of this process and will be prioritized accordingly. And that's part of this project.
And that addresses the fires, like a fireman not saying, oh, I can't put that fire out, it's not my district. So that's fabulous. But in terms of the clearing the brush part with these gerrymandered areas, those seem to be separate. And then also the question about the fire trucks getting up to a road which is clogged with cars.
Right, and that's part of our, the working together, the mutual aid, the automatic aid in that area, and having the evacuation routes established. We are going to have, and I think I've passed this on to Sohaila, where we are going to have our first evacuation exercise with your group this month, and it'll go all the way into May in preparation for our Golden Eagle exercise, which is throughout this whole area, the East Bay. And so that's part of that plan. In terms of the fire apparatus being able to get there, that will be part of that exercise. So these are mechanisms and plans that are already established and in place, and obviously before my time perhaps they haven't been exercised in the way we should have, but that's something that moving forward is going to be part of not only the Fire Safe Council, but our efforts here as a fire department to be able to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I'll acknowledge there's going to be a lot of questions that'll come up today that we all may need to work on together to find an answer or a solution for. So it's a common thing in meetings that are this big to have that. So and as we work forward and continue to work together, that's one of the things that we will start bringing forward the planned out solutions for those exact challenges that you're bringing up. So Marilyn, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I do have one thing that I think is important that the Fire Safe Council, I hope, can act on, but maybe it's something that's actually not allowed. And that is, we have difficulties here in great part because our building code isn't appropriate for a very high wildfire zone. And I've looked at the city's fencing requirements, for example, and they were banning welded wire, which is actually one of the best fencing materials in wildfire country, and other peculiarities. Then the vegetation management rules are not appropriate to very high wildfire zones. And the county wants to impose fees for any trees removed, which is again is a big problem with so can FireSafe Council act as an advocate for updating building codes and vegetation management rules and all that to government agencies to make us a safer community rather than being caught in these situations where we can't enforce dangerous, clearing of dangerous vegetation because the rule doesn't let us?
Yes, and I'll share with you, you have a somewhat of a local fire safe council down in the Bay Area that actually is quite actively involved in those same exact challenges you're talking about. And as they work, and different fire safe councils tend to support each other, you gather the folks together to communicate with your elected officials. Oftentimes it's an issue of not being really aware or up to date. I come from a place where it still discusses the actual use of horses in the roadway and where your hitching posts need to be. So I'm in that county. So I know that bigger counties like yours, obviously, there's still some things that may be out of date that are not consistent with the actual fire mitigation that's coming in the future. And I'll talk a little about that. So
can you tell me what group that is so that, or at a later time if you want, because I think we need to talk. That's actually a very big priority here.
Well, and I don't. So Brooke, where is Sue from? Is that Oakland Actual Fire Safe Council or Alameda? And we have Cheryl Miller here, so I know.
Oh, you mean Piper. Sue Piper?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, she just moved up to Portland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering if it might be Oakland. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. And there's oftentimes those conversations like at our regional meetings where the Fire Safe Council says, hey, we're having challenges getting a hold of Caltrans, and we want to explain to Caltrans what's happening with these roadways coming through our jurisdiction. And we've coordinated some meetings where Caltrans has brought their employee list to the table and said, please reach out to us if there's a problem. We want to communicate. And due to changes in constant overturn of employees, they didn't have the right numbers for folks to reach out to. And we are, in my jurisdiction, we're actually able to coordinate some project work through those entities that sometimes are challenging to get a hold of. So absolutely, your strength in numbers and as an overall organization, strength in state numbers as we bring all the different regional fire safe councils together to support you. So one of the things that, as there's constant changing defensible space rules, you're going to see the zero zone coming soon under the defensible space, which is going to be something that, some folks have maybe not heard of yet, but actually having an area around a house that has no vegetation or around a building and the enforcement of that in the upcoming years. So as those things change, oftentimes local ordinances don't necessarily match that. We need to work with those different partner agencies and sometimes the elected officials to get those things changed. So
Mike, that's exactly what I'm talking about, because I do fire escaping education for UC Master Gardeners, and actually I've done stuff with Oakland Fire Safe Council. And it drives me crazy that we can't get people to even cut away 10 feet on each side of the roadways, any flammable material so people can get out. I mean, it's such a simple thing, but we can't do it because there's no code to help us do it.
Right. Yeah. And there's, again, the support network we bring, and we have, like Yana, to be able to talk from the, some of the experts that are out there talking to our legislator. We bring them to the table. They come to our meetings and they discuss a lot of these topics. So I want to add you to that list of people for your area there. Thank you. So Haley, go ahead.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions for you. First of all, there were some questions about the map that Chief Montoya mentioned. If you remember, everyone, I sent an email, asked you about problem areas. Some of you responded, and I just posted it in the chat. I've been trying to be transparent about it. I wrote to Chief Montoya about it. I wrote to our city council. I eliminated last names, but with first names, everything I received, I put there. Chief Montoya has made his own map. If Chief provides it to me, I will share it with the community so you know. And then from there on, we can go about setting a priority for the projects. Mike, I'll be more than happy to give you a tour. The chief was supposed to spend an hour. It took 2 hours and still we missed some areas. So please allocate like minimum 3-4 hours so you can get a tour of the entire area, get a sense of what's going on. And if you could give us a roadmap about what's next, what's expected from us, and the pre-application, does it mean we can submit an application before becoming fire safe? Anything that needs to be done next step, please let us know.
So the coordination through the city is going to be an important part, and understanding that a FireSafe Council is going to have the need to basically have a financial pass-through. So if the city works as the fiscal agent, what we can do is work directly with the city to start working on grant applications for you. And again, utilizing the workforce that's here, all these folks that are in the room. And there's a lot of chat while I'm talking. I tend to try to stay focused on my screen and not look at my chat too much, but I did notice there are some folks that are talking about having some expertise in grant writing that are in this group. So we have some good folks that are going to be a big part of moving this forward in the future. And again, today's kind of a kickoff community meeting. I think that really handing this over to you and saying, how many meetings do you want to have? How frequently, how long, and how we go from there. I have a Zoom account that obviously I can help coordinate your meetings with you. If you provide me the list of invitees, we can get that sent out. Or if you want to take on getting a Zoom account, it's probably a good thing to do at this stage, and maybe working through the city would be an option. So I'll leave that up to the chief on coordinating how that works. But again, we're here to support this group, and as we move forward with a goal of handing this over to you, and then we back off a bit and become more of just an outside support who's here to assist you as you move forward as an organization. So I know we're getting close to the time we had planned for this. Well, I'll stay here as long as we need to, but I see a couple more hands up. So I'm going to jump over to Pam.
Hi, thank you again. So again, I am in El Sobrante. I live on a huge hillside that is, with winds, it's very serious. I mean, when you see it from the road, it's like the whole hillside is right below me. And so the two questions I have are erosion control. Once we clear cut the brush, what is it that prevents erosion? And then where are the rules about the defensible space? Where are those articulated so we can see them?
So to answer part of that, the Public Resources Code, 4291 of the Public Resources Code actually is a good portion of those rules. Getting into more specifics, it's going to be, does Contra Costa County have anything that's designated under defensible space? And then we have upcoming changes to those rules. And I'll continue to forward that information as it changes. So that was one question. As far as erosion control, I would tend to hand that off to somebody more of like with Mark's background, who's a watershed person and understands a lot of that. And I think somebody who may have that background.
And
Chief, go ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to that. I'll speak to Park District property. So we do not clear cut whatsoever, and I'm aware that some people aren't happy with that. We have a diverse community out there. Some don't want us to have trees at all, and some don't want us to remove any trees. And so the Park District shoots for a balance of having a healthy, resilient forest that can prevent itself from tree die-off and things of that nature, and some of the environmental conditions that we're dealing with. But at the same time, a forest that, if or when it does catch on fire, from a firefighter perspective, it's not going to produce a flame length that's higher than 5 feet, something that we would not be able to mitigate with our hoses. And so the fuels plan that we have, I'll just give you an example. But we'll shoot for, when we're doing a thinning project, spacing between 20 and 30 feet between trees, so that when fire does burn through there, it's not going to produce such a flame length that it makes it a situation from a firefighter perspective that we can't mitigate it. So by doing that, it keeps the hillside still intact so that we can prevent the erosion issues that you're you're speaking about, because that is a very serious concern.
I apologize. I didn't make it clear that I'm on a grassland because we've had 2 horrific fires over the years that have taken every tree out. We have no trees. We have grass and we have chaparral. So the clear cutting is about the chaparral. So once you have a fire erased hillside, huge erased hillside, all there is grass and chaparral. The chaparral, of course, is very dangerous. So once that's cut out, what do you do to keep the bare ground from eroding?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. If it was Park District property, we're going to shoot for islands of chaparral. And so we're going to keep some chaparral in place and shoot for islands. And so pockets where we keep some of the brush still there so that we can prevent the erosion issues, but at the same time, mitigate the fire hazard issues, which you'll get if you just let it grow out of control, or it's just thick and no space between different brush.
Is there a cover crop more than just the grasses that is better for, I guess it still has to be cut every year, obviously, because it's a fire hazard when it dries out, but is there a better cover crop than just grass?
I'm sorry for interrupting, but let's keep the meeting to the point. We have a list of those on 94803.org. Thanks to Marilyn, our master gardener.
Thank you, Sohaila.
And also Trisha Trisha raised her hand finally. Okay, thank you.
I just want to say, Pam, I'll talk to you because I have a couple of suggestions.
Okay, next I'm going to go to Greenbrier Council.
Hi, yes, I'm David Zuckerman. I'm the president of the Greenbrier Council. This is something that I'm not sure if it is out of scope for this meeting. I could talk offline a little bit with Sohaila, but you were mentioning coordinating with the Firewise Council, and you've Chief Montoya, you identified these areas of concern, and Greenbrier is definitely, I'm sure it's within that area. I actually sent you an email of some pictures. I kind of walked up in the area kind of by Kipling and Amend, and I shared some images with you. I'm not sure if you got it. I could send them again. But as far as I know, it sounds like there's going to be a grant portion of this, which is going to be put into place to do some fire remediation possibly. But I'm wondering about the timeline. It's March 10th. Is it feasible that this work will take place before this fire season? Can all that happen in time?
Was that question to Chief Montoya?
I think it's Chief Montoya. Sohaila, you may know more information on this, and we could take it offline. But if you do have an answer to that, Chief Montoya, it'd be good to hear.
No, I don't have an answer to that right now or for the Greenbrier Council, but this is something that we know is time sensitive. And I think Lily alluded to that a little while ago, where we can start that process and talk to her. And that's a conversation that I look forward to having with her and Sohaila and Mike. But we're going to try to get this done as soon as possible. So I don't know if we'll be able to meet that mark, but we're certainly going to try. And this is all, it is time sensitive, like I said. And but I think it's a good opportunity because even if we don't meet the mark for the funding for this fire season, we can start this process and definitely be prepared for next fire season. So, well, I take that back. Fire seasons now seem to be year round. So
that's what.
Yeah, so
that's what I want.
We no longer talk to, like when Mike and I first started in the fire service. It's changed a lot. So, but to answer your question, I think moving forward, we're going to try to get this done as soon as and that's our goal, is to shoot for getting it done this fire season.
Okay, so is it accurate to say if the applications, the grant isn't able to come through this year, there probably won't be much fire remediation until next year? Is it contingent on the funding coming through from this grant?
It is. It's contingent on funding of all these projects. But also perhaps there may not be doing any mitigation, but we can start the other components of the FireSafe Council, which is the education, the evacuation routes, all of the meetings that we're going to have moving forward, being part of that, and everybody raise the awareness. All this will be part. We're just not going to wait for the funding to show up and then start. No. That's going to those components are going to be taking place as soon as we establish this.
And another important part of this is again, with multiple jurisdictions being here in the room as agency partners, a lot of those folks are already in progress on getting working on these projects. So again, you have so many overlapping. It's like a quilt. You have so many different patches of different organizational property that again, PG&E, East Bay Regional Fire, East Bay Regional Parks, those folks are all working currently on some of the projects. So this is going to again move into the other areas that haven't been identified in those already established projects and continuing to work forward. So
and this brings a good point that we need to all be mindful of, right? Because of the uniqueness of this area and so many stakeholders, you know, we don't want to overlap and duplicate our projects and energy here. So that's part of this coordination, and it's going to be difficult. I won't lie to you, but at the same time, I think, you know, it's an opportunity where people that are currently doing projects, perhaps they can, with our collaboration, say, okay, well, yeah, that's important to us, but perhaps because of the priority being in this area, perhaps we could move it over here. So this is part of that all part of that collaboration and working together to prioritize these projects and do them, you know, in the best interest of this area.
great point, Chief. Thank you. Tricia, I'm going to head over to you with your hand up.
Hi, I'll try to make this quick. It's kind of on the same lines as Pam was talking about. I live on La Colina, and there's about 10 to 15 of us along here, and our land, our backyards butts up against the Waldorf School. And I've paid for trees that belong to the school now to have them trimmed. They're huge, huge eucalyptus trees that were planted many, many years ago. And they're, you know, they just drop so much debris all the time. And I'm just wondering if on this map that we've been talking about a bit, if those trees may be, you know, part of the plan of removing them or trimming them. I had Davy Tree Service come out about a year or two ago to assess all those trees, and they said it would cost about $60,000, and that wasn't even removing them. That was basically trimming them and keeping the trees that are alive and healthy, just, you know, trying to keep the debris down. And as you know, with eucalyptus, they're full of oil and they drop an incredible amount of debris all the time. So I'm just wondering if that's any sort of priority in all of this, or, you know, maybe that map will explain that to me. I'm just not sure.
And again, I think this is a great collection of these different parts of the priorities as we move forward. So identifying an overall project and planning stages for an overall project, you know, seeing where those different items come up on the priority list is an important part of this. So I'm going to jump over to Gary's iPhone for the next hand up.
Okay, so I have one question, and it's not about preventing the fire, but
I'm not hearing you, Gary.
Does Cal Fire take over?
Gary, you're not coming through here. We're not hearing you.
Is that there?
Can't hear you right now.
I'm not muted, so I don't get it.
Try taking the speaker off and talking directly into the phone.
Yeah. Gary, you may want to put your question in the chat.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. Okay, I'm going to put a question in the chat because I can do that.
Okay, well, we'll look for something, I believe, in the chat from Gary. All right, so moving on, I think what we probably need to do, as we've kind of gone over our planned time here, is establish an idea on availability for folks to hold another meeting. And as a kickoff meeting, of course, you know, there's a lot to cover. There's probably a lot of this we'll be able to communicate via email through. So one of my plans for today is to collect all the email addresses that are going to be in the chat and establishing an overall email list connected to the partners agency list that we have together to start sharing information and documents and so on through a reply all via that email. And that can get a little overwhelming too. But what I'm going to do is add the maps that the chief has that he provided me to an email. We'll get that on there. And then also look for a future date and time for a meeting. We see a lot of good forward movement with this group, and a lot of clearly a lot of excitement and a desire to move forward. So I'll turn that over to Sohalia, but I think what we might want to do is look at a meeting in the next week or two, and then start establishing maybe a standing meeting. And what we'll need to know, and Sohalia, I'm going to turn this over to you if it's okay, as a collector of this information, is what date and time works best for everybody. You know, sometimes with groups like this, maybe the daytime isn't the best time, and maybe it needs to be in an evening after work or otherwise. So we just need to figure that out and then work forward on trying to find out how that works best for the community members. And then the next stage will be, obviously, as we continue to communicate, I'm going to mute you, Gary. It's just making a horrible sound on our end from your phone here. So what I'm going to try to do is not only communicate via this email, but I'll coordinate through Chief Montoya. Chief will communicate through Sohalia, and we'll get the information spread out to the community members. So I think that's probably where we need to move forward from here. Does that work for you, Sohalia?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. I'll do my best in organizing the meetings, reaching out to the community, and I will even share the recording of this meeting with other members of the community who couldn't be here. The best time for us is usually around 6, 7 p.m. for many of the community members.
Okay, and I'll be happy to coordinate getting our folks there for that. So, and let's see, Gary, you got your hand up. We want to try it again. We didn't hear you last time. It's just making a horrible sound.
Gary put his question in the chat.
Oh, good. Okay. Can you read that for me?
It's
you're muted.
When will CAL FIRE get involved once a fire starts in this area? I know CAL FIRE has its station out near Antioch.
Chief, you probably have the local expertise there. I know there's not a lot of SRA in that area.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of SRA. And so eventually, I think, I mean, the good part is that we don't really we don't have anything against CAL FIRE, but if it really gets big, then they are going to be here. So hopefully we'll keep that to a minimum. But no, if it gets big enough, they will assist us here. Yes.
So to kind of explain, there's different areas throughout the state of responsibility area. SRA is state responsibility area, FRA is federal responsibility area, and LRA is local responsibility area. And then, for example, I see Chief. Go ahead, Chief, from East Bay Park.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, because we have a mutual aid agreement with CAL FIRE. So Richmond is within the mutual threat zone. So whenever you have a fire, let's say it's on Park District property, and it's adjacent to Alvarado staging or something like that, that's considered MTZ mutual threat zone. So it automatically triggers a CAL FIRE response. During a high fire danger day, you're going to get roughly 12 type 3 engines from CAL FIRE, 2 hand crews. From the Park District, you'll get 1 type 3, 1 water tender, and 1 helicopter. And then from the CAL FIRE, you'll get a helicopter from them and 2 air tankers. All those resources are just the state resources and the Park District resources, not counting for the resources that you're going to get from the neighboring cities of El Cerrito and any adjacent city. Because fire, someone had a question earlier about borders. We have mutual aid plans, and the Park District goes to the neighboring fires that are adjacent to our land. We don't stop at borders in that way. It's a very one type of team process when it comes to putting out a fire.
Excellent point, Chief. Thank you. So hopefully that answered your question, Gary. If you want to nod, if it did. Okay, good to hear. All right, so Tricia, I see your hands up. Is that from before? You're on mute, huh? Okay, so I think for now we have a plan forward. And again, it's going to be coordinating a future meeting. Oh, go ahead, Tricia.
Sorry.
Okay, so moving forward, we'll plan another community meeting. It's probably going to be in the evening time coming up. And so Helia will coordinate that with Chief Montoya, and we'll get together for a plan or day 2. And as we do that, obviously, we're going to come up with new questions and things like that. Feel free to exchange that in the emails, and then we'll coordinate. And as we move forward with your FireSafe Council meetings, we can establish an agenda to see exactly how you want your meetings to run. That'll keep them in a time block, so we won't be on for too long. But again, I think we're moving forward, and we have a good picture of what our community is looking at, what they need, and what they want. And it's our goal as the agency partners to support getting that move forward and getting that FireSafe Council started, and looking at some funding opportunities for your organization, and then looking at long-term project work. And then the important part, maintenance. And the maintenance is actually, as we continue years down the road, to ensure that all the work that gets done by the group this year or next year continues to get done, so it doesn't come back. And oftentimes with fuel breaks and things like that, what you'll end up seeing is an organization can put $1 billion into making a great fuel break, and if it's not maintained, a few years from now, that's right back where we started. So with that, I want to thank everybody today for their great work. Chief Montoya, go ahead.
Just one question, Mike, before we leave. So if we look at the handbook, right, and this is a copy of, hopefully everybody has, in the step process here, I think the membership recruitment, and correct me if I'm wrong, where it's listed starting the council, I think we have that covered here with this group. So I think the next step here would be what we're talking to, just so that everybody's clear, is the first organization meeting, and that's would be our next one, correct?
Correct. And as we move forward down the process, we'll establish bylaws, and we have great templates to work from. And then, as we move forward, maybe have the city council adopt the group as a FireSafe Council as being under their authority as a board. So there's a variety of things we'll work on, and some of them are kind of new, because as I mentioned before, we do this sometimes with government entities like RCDs, sometimes with counties. But I don't know of a city that's done this. So we're excited, Chief. You're kind of pioneering something really new, and what could be a great success for our future.
Yeah, we all are excited, and I am especially. And yeah, it's great. I look forward to all this moving ahead as everybody else.
We are all very excited. Thank you so much. I just wanted to bring it to your attention, Mike, that this area is called El Sobrante Valley, even though we are right by Wildcat Canyon. That's not how we call ourselves. I call my group 94803 community, because it's a community of, San Pablo Unincorporated and City of Richmond. But for the name, perhaps we can go with El Sobrante. When we're going to establish it, we're very excited. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chief Montoya. And we look forward to it. We're really excited about this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I'll be forwarding the recording to you, Chief Montoya and Sohola. What I do want to mention is down in the chat part, there's a little section where you type your message. On the far side, there's a smiley face and then 3 dots. If you click on that 3 dots, you can actually capture all the information that's in the notes. It'll save to a file on your computer, and you can be able to have a lot of the information we collected today for not only tracking, again, the time of the group that's been put in for future funding, but also maybe be able to assist in identifying questions that need to be answered in future meetings. So with that, thank you to all our wonderful citizens for attending today and being part of this. And thank you to our agency partners, chiefs, and everybody from our agency partners that are showing your community is important, and we all want to make sure everybody's safe. So with that, have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.